take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Life in Red.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to, what episode is it? Episode 25 of the Life in Red podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Forsyth, and today, very pleased to be joined by my new friend, Emma Khazzam. Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Look
Hi,
at that. You are the first person that I approached in real life with a sales pitch to join me on the podcast. Yep. I watched you speak at an event we both attended at the Canadian Nature Museum, and I thought it was very interesting. And afterwards, I walked up and I was like, God, I hope this isn't weird. Do you want to be on my podcast? And I was like, oh God, I swear it's real. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
Of course.
And that now that you know that it's real. And
it is,
it's not like a weird thing. Because that's probably a weird thing that someone might do. Like, do you want to come on my podcast? Like, no, not at all. A creepy man. Go away.
No, I was kind of surprised, but I was like, whoa, all right, podcast?
I figured the business card.
Fun.
Yeah, I figured the business cards were official.
Yeah, it made it really official. You just wrote your, Life in Red on my hand.
With a smiley
be like,
face.
all right.
We were talking beforehand off mic. You have kind of a lot of different things that I found interesting that we could talk about. First things first, this thing that I watched you talk at was like I said, an event at the Nature Museum, and that's because you were talking on behalf of this new program you're involved with. It's called NatureNEXT.
Yes.
You seem pretty passionate about it when you were talking.
I was. You know what's funny about that the speech? So I gave this speech at the Nature Museum, and I started writing it at 4:00 in the morning on a plane on my way to Ottawa from a 20-day trip that I had done, doing a circumference going around the world, and I finished writing it in the car on the way to the Nature Museum.
I remember hearing that you just got back from Japan, like not too long for that, before that, and then you made it there.
And then I made it there, and I gave the speech, and I was like, is this going to go well? And it went great, and I got your business card, and here we are, and I can talk about NatureNEXT.
Yeah, so this is a program, I'll let you talk about it,
All right.
It's to get young people involved with museums, right?
It's to get young people involved with museums and how amazing I feel that might museums
be
are.
A challenge. I know in a previous episode, I talked with Laura Van Zon about museums and getting how it can kind of relate to younger people, because I feel in a generation where people find things fascinating, but when you're glued to your phone, the museum might, I could just watch a video on YouTube. Why did you want to get involved with the museum at this capacity, and what's this program like?
So I wanted to get involved with the museum because museums have been a big part of my life since I was really, really young. My parents when we were young, my parents took me to museums almost every single weekend. So whether it be the Nature Museum or the Science and Tech Museum, any of the museums in Ottawa, and then when we did traveling around the world, we would go to the museums around the world. So going to museums and being patient enough to look and to make connections between different exhibits has always been a big part of my life. So when I went to the Nature Museum for an event, I got approached by Stephanie, who works at the Nature Museum, and she was like, this is a really cool program that we're going to launch soon. I think you'd be really invested in joining it. So I took some time, I did some research about it, and I found that it really fit who I was. So it's young people, young professionals donating to the museum, and you get all these really, really cool benefits along with the fact that what your donation is going towards is helping nature and helping, save the bees and the trees, which I think is really, really important because, we got one planet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing right now with, climate change and pipelines and plastics. Like those things are in the news pretty much every single day, one way or the other, on how it's going. And I'm sure you've seen with your travels a lot of different impacts with nature. Like, have you seen firsthand, like plastic in the ocean or anything like that?
One of the most recent really hit in the face that we got with plastics and the changes. So I went, right before I gave my speech at the Nature Museum, I went on a trip, and one of the places that we went to, my mom and we went together, it was Mongolia. And my mom had been to Mongolia on her honeymoon, and she was there about 24 years ago. So when we entered Mongolia now, 24 years later, she was shocked by the amount of garbage and litter that was just on the ground, because 24 years ago was a time where Mongolia had just gotten out of being a Soviet state and, you know, wasn't really introduced to that. And now that they are, seeing how just that area, the nature is just being polluted, was just a real shock.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting place to go on a honeymoon.
Yeah. They went on a year-long travel around Asia.
So traveling has been, like, it's ingrained in your family.
Ingrained in my family. My parents met at an airport. I don't think you can...
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go.
There you go.
So what are these types of things, going back to the NatureNEXT program? Like, you make a donation. Is there a set amount that you get?
So there's a set amount. You can start at a $350 a year, and with that you get all these really, really cool benefits. So you get to be invited to all these VIP events. So that's where I met you, and it's VIP events where you get to go behind the scenes and see exhibits before they open, talk to really, really interesting people of Ottawa and make really incredible connections. Mm-hmm. You get free Nature Nocturne tickets. You get a discount at like the boutique and the Nature Cafe, and, you know, free admissions to the whole museum with a guest. So they have, and plus, so they have all these really cool perks that you get when you join this program.
So it's pays for itself, and like the tickets if you're an avid museum attending. And right now this is only, I believe, at the Museum of Nature.
Yeah, only at the Museum of Nature.
I'm sure other museums probably have their own program or getting into it. But I think, you know, if people are involved with museums, this is a great way to kind of enter a foray of getting young people involved with these types of institutions, because there's so much benefit to learning about not only nature, but whether it's the history museum or war, or, you know, just a general science museum, that, you know, there's so much to learn, and there's constantly new exhibits that...
Yeah, that's another thing that people don't know. There's always something to do. There's always something new. Museums are ever changing. If they stayed the same for 10 years, then no one would go anymore, because you'd have all your exhibits memorized. But they have things that are constantly changing and new artifacts that are being brought in. There's always something new to learn. And even if the museum didn't change, every time that you went, you would learn something different. Right,
yeah. Something would draw your attention, or maybe you start reading something more than you did before. You're older and you understand something more. I know that's a big thing for me when I go to museums, that I've seen it before and I've probably read it before, but as I get older and, you know, more quote-unquote intelligent, some people maybe disagree, but that I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what that means, because I maybe learned something else from other places and didn't understand, but then I can bring it there and see the connection between the two. I'm like, oh, okay. And now that kind of makes sense to me. I know that happens to me a lot at the Science and Tech Museum, especially with sound and all that type of stuff, where it's like, you don't really know.
Newly renovated museum.
It's very nice, yeah.
Very excited about that.
So it's pretty new here. You like it? You're enjoying yourself? We went and saw the pterosaur exhibit.
Yeah, the pterosaur exhibit
before it opened.
Yeah,
so that was
I didn't really know what a pterosaur was before I saw that exhibit.
No, I had to have the conversation. I was like, "What's the difference between a pterosaur and a pterodactyl?"
Yeah,
and I was like, "Is it a dinosaur?" And then they framed it to me as like, "No, it's a pterosaur. It's with them. It lived, but it'd be like a bird and a insect, right? Like it's a totally different species that lived." Anyways, if you're in Ottawa, go check it out.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
It's really, they have these huge models, and a lot of their information is from a museum in New York. So if you take the time to read the writing that's on the wall, it's really, really well presented.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. How do people get involved with this?
With the NatureNEXT?
Yeah.
You go onto NatureNEXT, onto the Nature Museum website, and you can find us there. You can see a link. There's a little picture of me with a little bio if you guys want to check that out.
There you go. I did the plug for my friend Stephanie. Yeah. You've traveled so much, from what little I know about you. you just said you went on a trip around the globe in 20 days.
Yeah.
Where did you go?
So we started off at Moscow, and then we took the Trans-Siberian, which is a train, and it's a local train. It's not a tourist train, so it was filled with Russians, and no one spoke English. It was a very interesting experience, and we went from Moscow to Mongolia through Siberia, stopping along the way. So we stopped and we went to the border between Asia and Europe. We saw where the Romanovs were murdered. We saw the largest freshwater lake by volume in the world. So we got to see all these things in Russia. And when you're traveling in Russia, in Canada and in North America, we have this view. And then when you go through it, you realize that, our view is a bit skewed, which was really interesting. And then we went through Mongolia and learning about the history of Mongolia and how they view Genghis Khan as just, they love him.
Do they?
Love him.
Oh, wow,
yeah,
okay.
He's on their money. They have it's the biggest statue of a horse in the world, and it's just sitting in the middle of the...
Because I'm trying to think as, an observer of history, like, I don't even know how we, I don't know how you do, but how I observe, was he bad? Like, I guess he was considered, a bad person. He pillaged and went through villages and killed a bunch of people. I can't remember the fact. I wish I looked it up. Maybe it. He wiped out, a certain percentage of the population of the world.
Well, the way that the Mongolians view him is that he is the one that united all of Mongolia. So Mongolia was all these different tribes, and then he went around and conquered them all to make a united front of Mongolia.
Wow.
And then it was his grandson that actually went further. So went to China and tried to go to Japan, and then I think he went all the way to Baghdad and Iran. And so then they kind of lost their whole empire. But they view Genghis Khan in this, they love him.
That's fascinating.
Yep.
What's the population of Mongolia? It's not very big. I know
it's either 1,000 or 3,000. I mean, 1 million or 3 million.
So that's
Sorry,
not much.
guys.
That's less than the city of Toronto, which is incredible. And when you watch, there's a bunch of documentaries. A lot of them still. I shouldn't say a lot of them. I don't know, but they live a nomadic lifestyle.
They do. So I don't know what you guys think about Mongolia, but for me, going there was exactly what I thought it would be. So you have these plains, and it's beautiful, and you have these mountains that are just out there. Not really mountains, more like hills. And then you have these yurts, these white roofed little yurts, which are these nomadic tents that they can take down and set up in about half an hour, which is super impressive. And they live this super nomadic lifestyle, and about half, I think it was 1/3 of the population are nomads. And
wow,
it's beautiful because you're wandering through on these dirt, not very well made roads, and you see herds of sheep and of goats and of horses and cattle running through and eating the grass in Mongolia. And it's absolutely beautiful.
It's a very much a hunter-gatherer still lifestyle, right? They're hunting and they pick up the village, where they live, to go find the food. Is that what they're kind of doing, or?
Their main source is the horses and the sheep and the animals that they herd.
It's like a moving farm almost.
It's like a moving farm, depending on where the grass is greener, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
What was Russia like?
Russia was... So the people... From my experience, the people of Russia are very cold, but once you get to know them, as soon as you get to know them, all of a sudden they're the warmest people ever. For example, I was on this train. We were traveling for a full 24 hours at one point, and there was all the trains that I went on. There was this little kid, and I would always automatically befriend the little kid because that's who I am. And so I was befriending this little kid that spoke no English, and I spoke no Russian. So we were speaking the language of the universe, which is just playing. And he was traveling with his grandparents, and after I was playing with him for a while, and he was getting more comfortable with me, and his grandparents were getting more comfortable after having a very cold exterior. They invited me into their cabin. I spoke no English, they spoke no Russian, but they served me tea and they served me cake. And we were with my little guidebook trying to figure out, where they were going and who they were visiting. And so for me, that's a quintessential Russian experience, is a cold exterior, but once you get to know them, they're so warm and welcoming.
Interesting. So you couldn't communicate with them, but yet you formed a relationship almost with them as you were going.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I love that the language of the universe is play, which is great. Well, like Moscow, did you feel uneasy? Did you feel unsafe? Like, was there a kind of like an anxiety in the city in a way, or was like did it almost just feel like normal? Like, you're obviously in a different country, but like just trying to get like a sense of the energy in the city, right? Because
in Moscow,
because we're like, as again, Russia, big and scary and evil,
big and scary and evil, guys.
Like, communists and Putin, and it's all bad from Russia. Bots. Well, like, what was it actually like in the city? Like, did you feel like a weirdness to it, or
there wasn't really a weirdness?
No.
There's the cars drive very fast, but other than that, the buildings are pretty beautiful. Everything's pastel colored with white, and so walking around Russia and I found that the further you get from Moscow, so the further we went into Siberia and towards the more Asian countries, the friendlier people became. And you can really see there's a big wealth gap. So the people that are wealthier live in, or the people that have greater means are in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And then as you get further away, you see that there's a big difference in wealth. And I was able to read, while I was doing this trip, I was able to read this book called Midnight in Siberia, which is this American journalist that takes the Trans-Siberian from Moscow all the way to the end, to the last spot. And while reading that, it really gave me a viewpoint of what Russia is in the modern world, because basically they've lived through 3-4 countries in the last 100 years, right? Mm-hmm. Before it was the Tsars and the royalty, and then came the revolution and the communist era, which was there for quite a while, and then there was a transition period, which they say was the hardest period that they had, and then it's now, democracy, and I'm putting little air quotes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But from the book and from what I experienced is Russia isn't quite ready, from what I saw, for full-on what we call democracy. They're not, because they've lived through so much transition,
Mm-hmm. Did you meet a lot of young people there, like, or anything, or was it more just kind of older?
It was older, and then little tiny, like, 5-year-olds.
Really, eh?
Yeah.
So there's not even a lot of, like, 20-year-olds
not that
you saw?
Not that I saw, or not that I talked to.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah.
So I want, gotta do some digging. If anyone knows, if a Russian is listening to this, I'd love to have you on.
Yeah, let us know, please.
So you traveled through there. You traveled through Mongolia. Did you see any of those falconers?
No, but I have. I'll show you a picture afterwards. On my Instagram, I have a picture of an eagle on my my forearm. Yeah, and
really
it's
cool.
Huge, and it was beautiful.
The gold eagle, is that what they have
I don't remember.
there? Oh,
I don't know.
And they're huge.
They're huge, but they're not very heavy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you went from, where'd you go into?
So in Mongolia, we stayed for about a week, and we went to the Gobi Desert, and we went around to national parks, and it was like I could go back in a heartbeat. We went from being in the desert in sand and sunshine, and the very next day it snowed. It's a very dynamic country. Mm-hmm. And then from there we went and spent a long layover of 2 days in Tokyo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So that 20 days it took you to kind of take the train, and then I've always wanted, I know a lot of people want to go to Japan.
Japan is a very hip place.
Yeah. But they just haven't, but a lot of people, it's like always on their bucket list to go see Japan, and like Tokyo must just be such a vibrant city. Everything
that is done there is done with such precision and art. So we went through a market, and all the food is done as if it's packaged like a jewel. It's so gorgeous. It's so beautiful.
It's okay. Your phone can go off.
My mom's calling me. Yeah.
You've traveled many more places, and that was one of the big things we were talking about. I've been
super privileged.
Where's the coolest place you've been? And that's a very broad term. What's the coolest? Term. What's the most interesting? Where did you go and you're just like, either this is so cool, I could never have imagined it was this cool, or, maybe it's this is so much different than what I thought it would be. Like, what are some of those places that are just like, that just stick out in your mind that are like, I can't believe I went there and I had this experience?
I think one of my favorite places has been, I have a few favorite places. One of them is Laos, which is in Southeast Asia, near Thailand and Cambodia. And when I was there, I did a like a little adventure, and we hiked up mountains and rice fields, and then went kayaking and went bicycling. And you go into these really remote villages, and they serve you food, and you kind of have to flick off ants because they're crawling on your food. And I just love adventure like that. So Laos, and it hasn't yet been commercialized, really, from what I saw. So it was just really beautiful, and from what I saw, so authentic. Another place, Ireland. I was in Ireland for about 2 months, and I did something called woofing. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's where you go on organic farms and you work, and in exchange you get room and board. So when I was there, it was so fun to be, barefoot the whole time and work in polytunnels with vegetables, and it's really seeing the heart of Ireland when the Irish people. Part of my heart's always going to be in Ireland.
Really?
So that was one of my first travels that I did on my own. I just turned 17.
Like solo?
Solo.
So you do travel solo?
I do, yeah.
Wow.
So I had no connections in Ireland at all, and yeah, it was.
And that doesn't make you like you're okay with just going and like just learning the way as you go.
I love it. I feel like everyone has to spend at least some point in their life, maybe at least a weekend, at least a week, just on their own, doing some sort of travel on their own where they don't know anyone, because you have to really learn how to live with yourself. You're going to be the only person that you're going to be with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Find some adventure.
I've heard that a lot, that when you go somewhere like Ireland is pretty, like the language is pretty similar where you can, but like people have said like going to a populate, like where you don't speak the same language, you don't go, and like you have to figure it out. Like
you learn so much about yourself.
Yeah, all you have is you to figure it out, and I've heard that's been such a great thing. I've referenced this a million times on this podcast, but Henry Rollins, who was one of the ones who inspired me to start this, but that's exactly what he said that I found, like, I just adored it. Like how you just will go and you have nothing else. Maybe the internet doesn't work and all you have is your instincts and your knowledge, and you have to figure it out for yourself using pretty much what, the creator or whatever you believe in gave you, and that it's one of the most beneficial things for anybody to do. I always find it interesting that when you look at a country like America, who doesn't, their population, like citizens who live in America, Americans don't travel typically, and a lot don't even own their passport. And you can see that kind of ingrained in their philosophy on patriotism and everything. And when you have people who travel and like just the polar opposite views, like you just become a child of humanity. After this extended monologue, would you, this is a thought I've had in my head for a little bit, but would you say that people are more the same than different? You know what I mean?
People are inherently good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Would you say that like we have more in common with each other than our differences?
I think we do.
Yeah?
Yeah. Especially if you get to know not only the exterior of someone, but once you really get to know them and have some shared interactions, you realize that, we're all human. And we all have our humanity in common, and, all of us love to laugh, and we love to play, and yeah.
What were some of the most interesting people that you've come across with, like culturally, that, you've interacted with that was just, you found interesting, you found dynamic, you found that fascinating?
So another one of my travels, I went to Tanzania, and the people of Tanzania, I found them so dynamic and so full of smiles, that so they were people that were very different than us and lived. We went on this little island called Ukerewe, and the people there are not very wealthy at all and live off the land, and you could really see that they live a very different life from that we do in North America, but they are just so happy to be living and to be in nature.
Interesting. Yeah. Where's Tanzania in the map of Africa?
It's right. So I don't know. Look at a map and have we can point it out on the map in Africa.
Okay. Because I have an uncle who works for the Canadian government, and he's in Senegal.
Oh,
right
I
now.
don't think it's
anywhere close.
Close.
I don't know. She's gonna pull up a map.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up a map.
That's another thing about travel, and I just find it fascinating with people who travel, because, you know, there are some people, as you know, naive to think that Africa is a country. Like when you say I've been to Africa, well, Africa is the biggest kind of continent land-wise, I think, in the world. And maybe Asia's bigger, but that there's so many different things in Africa, the different tribes, different cultures, different, you know, like dozens of countries. She's got the map up.
Yeah, I got the map. So Tanzania, for you, is right underneath Uganda and Kenya, above Mozambique, nearish to Madagascar.
So on the west side.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay.
It was very funny. So when I was there, it was right when Ebola was a big thing.
Oh.
But Ebola was on the very opposite side of Africa. And when I would tell people that I came back from Tanzania, they were like, oh, get away from me, you have Ebola. I'm like, guys, no.
Have you been up through like the Middle East at all in your travels?
I've been to Israel.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Israel, it's beautiful. Every place I've been to has been beautiful.
Really?
I'm a really positive person. And I just love everywhere I go, guys.
There wasn't a place where you're like I don't need to go back, besides Florida? Just jokes.
Well, I've only Florida. You know, everyone goes to Florida, but I've only been there once, and it was for a very short time with some very good friends / cousins of mine.
There you go.
I had a blast
but
there.
There wasn't like a country or anything that like it wasn't all it's cracked up to be.
No.
You just find fascination in everything.
You gotta go in not expecting much. You gotta go in expecting the bare minimum, and then you get there and you're always pleasantly surprised with everything that you find.
What was your longest travel?
I think,
at a time.
At a time, I think those 2 months in Ireland have been.
So it was 2 months in Ireland. Okay.
No, that's not true. I went 3 months in Mexico. That was a bit longer.
Mexico.
Yeah. Mexico.
Was it as scary as Trump makes it believe?
No, Mexico is not scary. So, I didn't tell you this, but I am half Mexican.
Okay.
Yeah, so that kind of ties
there you go.
in. My mom is from Mexico with background from France and Spain. So all my family from my mom's side pretty much lives in Mexico. Okay. So when I went there, I got to see my whole Mexican family and where they lived and how they are. So there's also, as in Russia, there's a very big difference between the people that are wealthier and the people that are poorer. And my mom's family they're not on the poorer side. They're slightly more wealthy, so they're not living a really hard life, but they are in dead center of Mexico. So Mexico is not scary.
Okay.
Mexico is fun. Mexico is a party.
I believe it. Like, did you have authentic tequila?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have an uncle that makes it, so oh yeah.
Got to get him up here. Yeah, I don't know. Mexico just gets a bad rap sometimes with you know, lots of stuff going on all the time.
Don't be scared of, you know, as long as you go somewhere and you make sure that it's safe. You're not going to a war-torn country. Don't be intimidated by bad reps.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good advice, because I mean, I remember when I was going to Paris, people were like, "Ooh, do you really want to go to Paris?" Because that wasn't too long after the Charlie Hebdo attacks.
Oh yeah.
With the journalists. So like the whole, I think my timeline might be messed up. It was before the Bataclan shootings. Anyway, I'm sound like an old dad telling about stories. It's good. So your mom, is she from Mexico or just of Mexican descent?
She was born, both my parents are immigrants. So my mom was born in Mexico, and then when she was around 10, I guess this gives Mexico even worse of a rep, but my grandfather didn't like, there is some corruption in Mexico, like in most not totally developed countries. Even,
well, there's
there's corruption
here,
everywhere.
So.
So my grandfather didn't like the corruption that was going on in Mexico, so he moved his whole family up to Canada, and my mother, after from the ages of 11 onwards, grew up in Montreal.
Okay. And then you told me a really interesting story of your dad's side.
So my dad's side, so I'm very mixed. So my dad's family come from Baghdad, so they're Baghdadi Jews, and they've, if you guys know about the Torah or the Old Testament, then there was the temple in Jerusalem got destroyed, and a whole bunch of Jews fled or were persecuted and sent to Babylon. So the story behind my family, which I think is pretty true, I took an ancestry test, so my dad's family has been or had been in Baghdad for thousands of years.
Wow.
And never left. So his family's from Baghdad, and after Israel became a state, it was kind of like no Jews allowed. So my grandparents were forced to flee. My grandmother was able to get on a plane with a suitcase, 100 pounds, like British pounds, and 3 gold bracelets, and she came from a very wealthy family in Baghdad, and that's all she was allowed to take with her, and she went to Israel. And my grandfather had to escape, so he went through the mountains of Iran and had a fake name and a fake passport and grew a beard and was able to rejoin my grandmother in Israel. And before they both left Baghdad, my grandfather wanted to marry my grandmother, but she said, no, I don't know if I'm ever going to see you again, and I won't marry you. If I see you again one time in the future, then we'll get married. And they met again in Israel.
Oh my goodness.
A couple of years later, and they got married, and they had my uncle. But the job perspectives were very poor, so they went to Brazil. And my dad was born in Brazil, so he spent a few years of his life in Brazil, and then they moved to Montreal.
I find it so fascinating, like, what brings people to Canada when you immigrate. And I was asking, I can't remember who I was asking this about the other day. What is it about Canada that makes people want to come here? Do you know what kind of was the draw?
So for my father's family, the draw was that they had a sister in Montreal.
Family connections.
It's family connections. And with my mother's family, my grandfather went to high school in Brébeuf, which is in Montreal. And he went to Ottawa U, because Ottawa U had a high school a while back. So he went to the high school at Ottawa U and later Ottawa U University. And so he fell in love with Canada, and he wanted to come back.
Interesting. So it's always because, like, you know, I just grew up here, so like I'm kind of jaded by it all.
Yeah.
I grew up in a small town, so even like my cultural background is so off. Like, it's lack of culture, to be quite frank. So it's it's always interesting to hear like why people chose to either come to university here, or I don't know, like, what's the perception of Canada to the rest of the world?
Well, I think the way that I view it is, when comparing it to America, America is a melting pot. So you put all these cultures and you melt them all together and you become American. And then Canada is more of a fruit salad. You know, you can see all the little chunks, but we're all here mixed together.
I like that. That's good. Did you come up with that yourself?
My mom did, so I took it from her.
I love it.
Shout out to my mom, guys.
One thing you brought up, the Baghdadi Jew, is that what you said? So,
Yes.
Your background's also Jewish.
Yes.
And you called yourself a...
So I'm a Reformed Jew. So I am Jewish. I'm a Reformed Jew, which is, I guess, the least orthodox of Jews that you can find. I call ourselves the cool Jews.
Yeah, and I like that.
No one get mad at me.
Like I said to you, is before you, at least outwardly, I've only met one Jewish person who's told me they were Jewish. So I had never even like explored the cult, like the religion, or even talked to people about it. And so I found it very interesting that came from you. And I saw, I Googled you, and I saw you, I didn't watch it, but that you had the bar. What, like, I guess, Because you explained it to me like there's like the extreme Orthodox.
There's ultra-Orthodox and conservative and Reform. There's probably some in between there.
Okay. What's the one, like, did you, for your bar mitzvah, like, is that what you had to, like, you study for a long time?
So for a bat mitzvah, so it's a bar mitzvah for a boy and a bat mitzvah for a girl.
Okay, sorry, my apologies. See, we're learning. Yeah, everybody's learning.
Everyone's learning. So that's where traditionally at the age of 13, you study a portion of the Torah, which is our holy book, and it's all written in Hebrew without vowels, and it's backwards, so it's very confusing to learn. And you study a portion of that, and then you sing it in front of your whole congregation, and you and you do a speech, and you affirm to them that you are choosing the Jewish faith to be part of your life, and you are now responsible for your actions in the Jewish community.
Okay. So, like, how long did it take you to kind of get ready for that? Because I've heard it takes a long time.
It takes a long time. So I'm super dyslexic. So reading English is hard enough on its own. So reading Hebrew was a totally other world. So it took me about 1.5 years to learn it all. And I had someone that helped me out. And yeah.
Wow. So you really got to get prepared. So when you want to make that step, like, you're truly making that step because it's like a commitment order to take that on.
Yes.
Like, and you were telling me, you go with your family still, and I think it's one thing. And as we talked about, I don't hold a religious faith to me, but I just find it so interesting, and the community aspect of it so beautiful because everyone, I'm sure you could speak to it, but like gets together. It's like a family thing now, and when other people are going out drinking or partying or doing dumb things, like you're committed to something like a power bigger than yourself.
Yeah,
which is also great.
And there's also something, I don't know if the other person that you met was that was Jewish told you, but
they just said Jewish. I was like, okay. I don't even know.
So there's something that's really interesting that we have. It's called Jewish geography. I don't know how many people that aren't Jewish know about it.
Never heard of it.
So if you ever go on any travels, or if you ever do anything anywhere, and you meet someone and you find out that you're both Jewish, you play this game, and it's how many people does it take for you to find out that you know the same person?
Sounds like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon type thing.
So, because there's Jews all around the world, but we all kind of know of each other, right? And there's been a diaspora of Jews. So my dad's family, after leaving Baghdad, they went everywhere. So I have family that's that we talk to. They're not just distant family, but family that we talk to in the States, in Australia, in England, still in Israel. They're all over the world. Mm-hmm. So there's this diaspora, and we play Jewish geography with any other Jew that you meet. Fun. You find someone that you know.
What draws you? What do you really love about it? What do you like? Why does it hold such a special place in your heart to honor that religion?
So, my family has been taking us to Friday night services, which are a shorter 45-minute service with a guitar and about 30 people. It's very small and inclusive. Also in my synagogue, women and men sit together, and we're really open to all types of people. It doesn't matter your race or sexuality or anything. So, if you're Jewish or not, we have lots of people that aren't Jewish that come and join us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What would it be like in like a Orthodox or like the ultra Orthodox? Like when men and women don't sit together?
Men and women don't sit together. They're very separated. Oh. The services are very different. I'm not the most comfortable in an ultra-Orthodox synagogue. Mm-hmm. So men and women aren't seated together. The men lead the service and kind of do their own thing, and the women are really bored, so all they do is gossip and talk. And then all of a sudden there's like a man that's like, be quiet, and he's like hitting his shoe on the stage, and
Okay.
Whereas where I go, it's everyone is fully participating, and it's really about being in the moment and singing and being together. And we do a prayer that's basically saying, thank you for bringing us to this moment together, and these are what we're thankful. And we always hold hands, and
That's so nice.
Yeah, it's a time where you can be, for me, I can have a really stressful week, and I can come to synagogue, I can walk in the doors, I can still be stressed, but as soon as I sit down and I say hi to everyone I know, and I sing the first note, it calms me down. And it's a moment just to be with community and with family, off your phone, off everything, and just focus on being there.
Absolutely. The hats.
Oh,
That's always my favorite thing.
Yeah. So there's kippas. So the little tiny circle hats that you see men wear, and women can wear as well. So those are kippas, those are little hats, and from what I understand, it's supposed to represent that there's always a level of separation between you and God. So it doesn't have to be a little hat.
Okay.
You can put a phone on your head and it can be a kippah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's,
You can put a piece of paper. You can put a cookie.
When you're listening to this, yes, I am the whitest person you know from a small town. I know nothing about this stuff, so that's why I'm interesting. So I'm sorry if I sound uneducated, but that's because I really am uneducated on this stuff. So I'm trying to think. Where I used to live in Ottawa. I used to live just off Craig Henry. Yeah. And I think there was quite a large population, but they had the curly.
They had the little curly hair, right?
Yeah. What?
So that's also So that's something that's not really in my community either. Everyone's pretty open. So the curly hair, from what I know, because I'm not the most familiar with it, is that you're not supposed. That's like one section of your hair that you're not supposed to cut. Okay. And I don't really know why. I just think you're not just supposed to cut it. We should look it up.
There we go. I have the internet here, but I always get distracted when I try to search things. Thank you for that. And I know there's a person that you might be putting me in touch with so I can learn a whole lot more about this, because very interesting. You did mention, though, and I'm not passing over it, that you're dyslexic.
Yes,
you have dyslexia.
I am, yeah.
What is that like? Because I don't know if it's a misconception of what we've learned about it as kids. We don't really learn about it, to be honest with you, but like people always use it as like a joke, like when you mess up with your spelling or something, it's like, oh, I'm dyslexic or something. Never heard that?
I've never heard that.
Small town thing. Probably. But what, like, I mean, coming from you, what is
so
it like?
It's pretty cool. So I've always had a challenge, like since I was really young, I've had a challenge to read and to write, and I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't know my rights from lefts. I had trouble doing a lot of things, and then they diagnosed me with dyslexia. And basically, for me, it's very difficult for me to read quickly. I have to read very slowly and take in each of the words, and sometimes words get mixed up, so and I'll think that's the word for ages. And
right,
then,
and here I'm a dick trying to have you read my my release form, not even thinking.
Yeah, it'll take me like 15 minutes to read that.
My apologies.
And then, but spelling for me is the worst. So for example, if I'm going to write you a thank you note after this podcast, I'm not going to just write a note on a piece of paper. I have to sit at my computer, type it up, use spell check, and then I have to copy what I wrote on the computer onto a little piece of paper. That's how much I can't spell.
So what's the trouble? Do you kind of know, like, cognitively what the trouble is? Like, where the disconnect is?
So it's when I can learn a word over and over and over and over again. I can spell it 100 times on a piece of paper, and then maybe an hour later, you ask me to spell the same word if it's especially difficult, and it's the connections aren't being made inside my brain. Okay. And I've learned, so I've also really privileged to have grown up in the family that I grew up in and have the education that I've had, and I've taken being dyslexic and, having a coordination disorder and having low processing speed and all this as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. I learn to work hard for what I do. I'm a really good student, but that's not because I take everything for granted and it just pops into my brain. I have to work really hard at what I do, and when I'm faced with a challenge, I don't give up. And that's something that I find a lot of people struggle with, is that as soon as they face a bump in the road, they give up easily. But I have learned that I can take the time and can take the energy to work through my challenges.
So in a normal night of homework, say, what might take, me an hour, like how long would that necessarily take? Would it depends?
I can't yet depends.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Like, so is it just like, so when you're writing like the word first, like what comes up? So it's just like, it kind of like the words, like, do you kind of have like the letters all there?
I know that there's an F and an S and a T.
Okay.
Because those are the words I can sound out, and then I have to, write it down. And
okay, so the sound, you're like, okay, we can go there. So the English language must just be hell.
It's just so I look through notebooks of when I was younger, and the word "of" is such a weird word. It's O-F, like that doesn't sound like "of" at all. So I wrote "of A-V" or "O-V," so because that's what it sounds like. And I'm totally okay asking whoever's there how to spell even the simplest things. I lost a spelling bee on the word boat. I'm that's a good perspective of like how maybe difficult the English language is, because then you have, PH as an F and silent letters and so for someone, like with dyslexia, how difficult really
it
hard.
must be. Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
But I love that it doesn't stop you.
It doesn't stop me. Nothing stops
And that like
me.
a challenge, like you're like, no, like you like rise above it. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things, I mean, I'm not relating these two things at all, but I love what you said about the overcoming a challenge, because most people give up. And that's like one of the things like I pride myself on, is like a lot of people will say they're going to do something and maybe even start it, but are they going to keep it up? Mm-hmm. Are they going to keep going? Are they going to... Most people love to start things. It's like going to the gym on January 1st. Like, I'm going to go to the gym this year. And a lot of people probably will. They'll get the gym membership, but then no one's continuous in what they try to set out to prove. And it lets the people who do and will continue to work, like it gives them like that advantage.
I'm pretty proud, especially if anyone knows me is listening to this. I have two siblings. I'm the eldest of three, and both my siblings are so smart. They are absolutely incredible people, and growing up with them, sometimes it was really hard, guys. Growing up with these two incredibly smart siblings, and not knowing how to spell boat.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but you told me you're straight A student.
Yep.
So
a lot of work.
Just put that into perspective, that a straight A student, and not only so when I went to university, I was that asshole that didn't try and would get A's. But I was also in social sciences. I wasn't in what you're in. Is
social sciences is still hard. Don't diss social.
I'm not saying it's not hard, but it's of opinion and how you write and how like I didn't have to do a reading. All I would have to do is just what I would do is like, I'm not reading this 40 pages. I'm gonna use this quote and then just build an argument around this quote. Like I didn't even read the thing. I just pick a quote, just be like, okay, like Aristotle said this, and then I just base this argument around it to fit my opinion. And that was like a kind of a gift I had, and then I'd get an A without having to do any of the work. But I just find that's not, there's facts, but it's not facts, right? Like I'm a bullshitter. I'm a talker. I can kind of get through it. You can swear on the podcast, by the way, if you have a potty mouth. But that's what I'm just really good at, navigating and sharing my opinion. But you asked me to do science, or you asked me to do math. Nope. No. I cannot do. Not math. I hate math, but science I love. I find it so interesting, like astrophysics and all.
I love science.
Right? Like it's so fascinating. I just completely suck at it because I can't do the math portions of it. Like my brain doesn't process it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would write essays on the back of my math test because I couldn't do word problems. So like I couldn't take,
Whoa.
yeah, so I couldn't take, it was a word problem, like Joe had 6, this is simple, but Joe had 6 apples, Bob ate 5, how many were left? I mean, that's easy, but when you started getting into university math and high school, like academic, like it just, I couldn't do it. I couldn't get the algebra, I couldn't get the arithmetic, like just, no, I'm done. So I'm just going to write a poem about why I'll never need to know this in the rest of my life. And I'd get like 2 out of 10. But my math marks suffered because that always had the largest amount of marks. So that's why I could never do science, like physics or chemistry or anything, because you needed the math, and I couldn't do it. So like I appreciate a brain that can wrap its head around the numbers.
Yeah.
That all to be said, you know, you're studying.
So I'm in food science. I'm in food science at Carleton, and I'm a huge nerd about it. I love it. It is so fascinating. So,
and that's not to be confused with a cook or a chef.
It's not to be confused with a cook or a chef, and not to be confused with nutrition. I'm not going to be a dietitian at the end of this. So food science, the way I like to explain it, is the whole process of a raw ingredient going onto and then having it on your plate. So we talk a lot about the chemistry of it and flavor science, and you know that I think food chemistry and flavor chemistry is absolutely fascinating. But you also talk about the microorganisms. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. The ones that help and the ones that make you die. There's a whole thought process behind packaging. Even having an apple open out in the grocery store, there's a whole thought about it. Or there's a slight bit of metal in your popcorn, microwave popcorn packaging that helps it pop, but you were told not to put metal in the microwave. So there's a huge thought about the packaging, and then there's also the policy. How do we ensure that what we're giving people is safe to eat and is continuously safe to eat?
That's a big thing, right? Because
it's a very big thing, and that's what the Carleton Food Science program is kind of focused on. Is about the policy. We have amazing teachers.
Yeah, like the things that you find in food that you have no idea what they are and why are they in my food.
Yeah,
it's a very big. Is that kind of like along the lines of what you're in your realm of study?
Yeah, we learn little tidbits about everything.
So it's like the main focus out of it. Like what
is the main focus? I think is of the program that I'm in at Carleton is using analytical techniques to find out the things that are in your food and the possible adulteration. So adulteration is when someone is adding something that they shouldn't be adding that could harm you to your food, and then figuring out the policy side of it. So
okay,
yeah,
because as I know you said you listen to some podcasts, but I'm very involved with mental health and mental illness, and food is something that very recently, within the last year to 8 months, I've started exploring more when it comes to my mental health. So learning things like microbiome in your gut and how that affects so many different parts of your body. Learning about what good nutrition is and what bad nutrition can do and how it affects your brain and all these, what supplements and what things you should be taking to augment, help your brain process certain things, and then also what's bullshit, like what's
There's
fake,
so much of that,
right? Like all these things that are gonna they claim to do this, but like
that's why it's so important to know your stats, guys.
Yeah.
Because people can mix things around, and whenever I'm trying to understand something, I always read the journal article. So what I think is really interesting, talking about mental health and about how you feed yourself, is respect your body. Your body kind of knows what it wants, so respect it and respect its wishes. When you have a plate, and some people have been told that they have to finish every single thing on their plate, but sometimes you're not hungry for everything on your plate, so don't eat yourself. Don't eat all the things on your plate. And talking about supplements, if you eat properly and eat all the fruits and vegetables and carbs and proteins and fats, all the really good things in food, then you don't really need supplements. You can get it all from your food.
I know I've that's I guess why I can appreciate what you're studying, because the science on food and on diet is just, it's so mixed.
It's ever changing.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had personal trainers on here and fitness people, and we kind of talk about that because it's such a confusing world for everybody. I think every
even
single
for
person.
Me.
Yeah, right. Like, what supplements can you take? Do you need protein shakes? Do you take all those things for the gym? Like, and you hear some people are like, absolutely, yes, yes, yes. And you have other scientists being like, no, 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 no. And it's just like, man, I don't know what to do. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. So like, I take a probiotic because I heard that was good. I take fish oil,
Okay.
and I take a multivitamin.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, with
As a food
the
scientist.
probiotic, I'll talk about that. So, so you talked about the microbiome. So the microbiome is these bacteria and these things that live in your gut. So we're basically the inside of our body. I'm talking about the mouth till,
Digestion.
Poop. That's just one long tube, and it's things that. So what enters there doesn't actually go in, there's things that don't go into your blood. So in your gut, for example, there's more E. coli cells, the individual cells of E. coli in your body than there are, like, for me, Emma cells in my body.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
Like,
Yeah. That's so the thing that like could kill us theoretically
is
in
like
us.
is always innocent all the time. Yeah. So with probiotics and, probiotic yogurt and things like that, they've done studies that show that, it can help a bit. I mean, they've done studies, and from what I have understood is that eating probiotic yogurt and taking probiotics doesn't do anything harmful to you.
So it's not going to make things worse.
It's not going to make things worse.
Is it making things better?
I don't know.
I guess it would depend on each person, right? And damn. You're supposed to answer all that question. Should I be wasting my money on these supplements?
Does it make you feel better?
I don't know.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I guess that's good for you.
That's the whole placebo effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to the energy healer, Jen Wozni. She came on as an energy healer, and I was like, "What do you say to people as, a placebo effect?" She's like, "Well, could that not be a form of energy?"
I think placebo effects can be very effective.
Exactly. Like, why do you have to view that as negative? Oh, it's fake. It's like, no. Because you're
like I might be. So my dad was telling me about something that he does. So he's a doctor, and I might be breaking this, but so warts. Okay, So what he tells kids that have warts is that you go and with your own money, you buy a potato and then you cut it in half yourself and then you rub it on your wart and then you go bury it, and by the time that it decomposes, your wart's going to be gone. All that's placebo. Nothing in the potato is going to help you. But that whole thought and then waiting for the potato and all the wart's going to go away if the kid doesn't touch it. So that's, it's all placebo, but it works.
Yeah. Right, makes him feel... Yeah.
It makes him, and he's doing it himself or herself, and...
That's fun.
Yeah.
You have an interesting family.
I do.
So what other... one of the things in your speech that you talked about, which I found fascinating, I've heard this a bunch now, is the insect protein.
Mm-hmm.
And I know not necessarily you're not working on that as a project or as a thesis or anything like that, but just some of that insight onto that subject, because as we all know, and I don't know if you eat meat or if you're a vegetarian, it doesn't really matter, but the world we live in and our food system is very unsustainable. So that's why we have things like corn and everything and overfed cows and horrible living conditions, because we have to feed a lot of people and we don't have a lot of time and people don't want to pay a lot of money for it. And so we have this very broken system. And when you think of things like insect protein, that is very, I don't know the science behind it, so I'm glad you're here. But like, insects are quite plentiful at this point.
Yes, there's crickets. So what we're looking at the most.
And I've eaten a cricket.
Yes, good job. High five.
Yeah, boom.
So crickets have a lot of protein in them, and insects don't take that much space. Are pretty easy to feed, and there's some people that feel an ethical factor towards killing animals, but might not feel an ethical factor towards killing insects. So from what I've studied and what I've found out is that we could really incorporate the protein from insects into our food, and it could just be a powder. If you go to your local Loblaws, you can just get a cricket powder protein. And it tastes kind of nutty, if anyone's wondering. It tastes a little bit nutty, and I think it tastes really good.
Yeah, I didn't find it have a very big taste. It was just kind of like dry.
Yeah.
But like the legs got stuck in my teeth.
Oh, well, if you have a powder, then the legs
you don't have to worry about the legs.
You don't have to worry about the legs. But I think there's lots of countries that eat insects. It's a very,
it's
in
almost
Mexico,
exclusively the Western world almost.
Yeah,
that doesn't.
So we have this thing that's called the ick factor. So insects are icky, and we don't want to eat icky insects. So I think that's, as soon as we break the barrier of the icky insect, then we're going to be able to expand on this a lot more. For example, sushi. Years ago, sushi was this, why are we eating raw fish? That's not very good. Why, what's going on with that? Or even lobsters. They were this, thing with lots of legs. Why are we eating lobsters? And now it's a delicacy almost. Yeah. We love to eat sushi and lobster. So once we break that with insects, I think it's going to help us out a lot.
Yeah. And I'm one of those people who has a problem with aesthetic food. Mm-hmm. Like, I like my food, like, if it looks
pretty.
A little gross, I'm like, ooh. But, when you find out all the food that's wasted just from people, from that, people like me who are selfish and like, oh, that apple's a little lumpy, so poof, into the garbage, right? Not me, but like,
okay.
The grocery
ugly
stores,
apples
like
are
the
beautiful.
System. You're so positive. It's so great. But like, like grocery stores and all the food processors, like if it's an ugly piece of food, it just goes in the garbage and doesn't even make it to the shelves. And you think of all the stuff that's wasted from that. I don't have a phobia of bugs. I don't particularly like them. They kind of fly in my face. I'm not very happy about
Extra
that.
protein.
Yeah, no, maybe one day, but not alive. I'm terrified of big insects like moths, praying mantis. When I watch Planet Earth,
yeah,
and I see the episode with the locusts, I lose my mind. I would die. I would be petrified, and watching millions of locusts fly by, I would die.
I'd be there right next to me, like, whoa.
No, I would turn white, and they would touch me, and I would die. I would have a heart attack. That is how much I don't like big bugs. But when you have millions of locusts, that would be pretty easy to harvest, and they're so.
Yeah, but you'd have to make sure that the locusts that you're harvesting and that you're using for food are safe. So that's where food science comes into it. You have to make sure that what you're having, the insects that you're having, you can't just go out in the air and get a little net and catch them and feed them to people. You have to make sure that the food that you're producing doesn't have any harmful, bugs in it. Bugs in the bugs doesn't have any harmful bacteria or things that can hurt you.
Do you not think, in a way, if it's not, I'm not talking about like West Nile or like very potentially harmful, but like, bacteria, a little bit of like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like,
back to the microbiome.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm not a scientist, as we've already established, and I'm sometimes dumb when it comes to that. But I've always subscribed to the eating dirt theory, as a child, like get exposed to things and it's okay to get sick as young because it's going to grow your immune system. And is that a true thing? Like,
it's a true, I'm bringing this back to the microbiome, but children that are breastfed, so the breast has lots of things that are not, that a sanitized bottle would lots more bacteria. But people, from what I read, kids that are breastfed will have a much more diverse and healthy microbiome because they're, exposed to a lot more.
Yeah, and that's where you start getting into the things like the superbugs.
Yeah.
Okay. I see what you're saying. You can just say you have to go. Oh. It's okay. We can cut it here. I think that's been pretty interesting. Emma Khazzam,
yes,
you have a lot going for you, and when you're big and famous,
I'll send you a note
here.
I will,
and be like, I remember this little podcast from this small redhead, and you come back and you tell us all the food science stuff you're doing and all the new travel
once
adventures.
I know more, and once all my views has changed, because
do you have like a website or like a social media you want anyone to follow you on, and be like, you pretty good, just keep the name out there.
Keep
Check
the
out
name out
NatureNEXT.
there. Check out NatureNEXT. You know,
Yeah.
be more open-minded.
Travel,
happy, travel.
experience things, and use that mindset that she has. And I know she's struggling. That, you know, you can overcome any challenge.
Yeah.
No matter I shouldn't say no matter, but you can overcome a good chunk of challenges.
I believe in you guys.
There you go. You can follow us, Life in Red Podcast, on Facebook and Instagram, Life in Red Pod on Twitter, and of course, lifeinredpodcast.com. Emma, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everybody.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.